What is happening, everybody? Jamie Stark coming to you here from the terrific 2 studio here in Fremont, Nebraska. And we're bringing to you today our mid-season college football rankings for the 2019 season. So I'm going to go top 10 on my college football rankings. I know there's going to be some disputable things in here. These are my judgments. And, I'm a resume guy. I definitely like looking at resume above all else. And this is for this year's rankings. I don't take anything into account from previous years. So we're just going off of quality of wins and somewhat the eye test as well, how impressive teams have looked, and if there are any other statistics that might play into these rankings. So here we go. My number one team in the nation definitely has the best resume so far in the season. They've got the toughest non-conference win, maybe with the exception of Auburn. So, in my opinion, the toughest non-conference win. They've looked incredibly impressive. They've got a very evolved passing game over previous years. And I think by now you probably know who I'm talking about. It's going to be LSU. Now, LSU is a team that has always had the athletes. They're one of the most athletic teams in the nation year in, year out. The problem has always been offensive scheme. Just watching them over the years, it's always been that they struggle to put up points. And they've always had plenty of athleticism, especially at the receiver and running back spots, offensive line, and a lot of it's been scheme and quarterback play that's held them back. Joe Burrow is playing out of his mind this year. Now, their toughest tests are coming up here in the next few weeks. They've got Auburn coming up next weekend, which will be a nice test for them. And then Alabama 2 weeks after that, after a bye week. So both teams coming off a bye week there when they play Alabama early November. And I think the entire nation will be looking forward to seeing that. And that game will probably most likely decide who wins the West in the SEC. So moving on to my number 2 team in the nation, this is a team that I think for the eye test alone has probably looked like the best team in the nation. They've just pulverized everybody that they've gone against, and that team is going to be the Ohio State Buckeyes. So Ohio State, unfortunately, as a Husker fan, they came and laid it on us. Not that we're that good of a team at this point in time. They do have a game coming up against Wisconsin here. I think at the end of October. So the games they've played so far, they don't have a stellar resume. They don't have like a huge signature win, but they do have a couple quality wins, and they just pulverized them again. So Michigan State, one of the best defenses in the nation, still I believe the top rushing defense in the nation in Michigan State. They beat them very, very handily. Cincinnati then as well. Cincinnati's a very good team this year, and they beat them 42-0. So this Ohio State team may be the best team in college football. Justin Fields is better than advertised. Also on that Heisman race, and Ohio State's a team to watch for the playoff, and they are going to be competing with number 3 on my board here, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the number 1 defense in college football this year, hands down. 4 of their 6 games so far, they've pitched a shutout. And that's probably, I haven't watched a ton of their games, but I'm guessing with how big of blowouts they've been, they've had their reserve defense in towards the end of games. So for them to still have 4 shutouts out of 6 games, it's just unreal. So they do have a couple of quality wins against Michigan and Michigan State. They just beat the tar out of both of them. And again, they do play Ohio State here the 26th of October, so next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend. And I think we're really going to see what this Wisconsin team is made of. If they can hang there with the Buckeyes, they might get 2 shots at Ohio State, and it's looking very probable they'll get 2 shots, unfortunately, again, as a Husker fan. But they look like an absolutely fantastic team. And this Wisconsin team is different from previous years. Previous years, they've become very one-dimensional with their running game. Everybody thinks about Wisconsin as giant offensive line, NFL-ready offensive linemen, and then a really high-quality running back. This year's no different, but this year they also have a very functional quarterback and then some game-changing receivers. Cephas as the receiver is a big play threat. So with Cephas and Cone and their tight ends, they use their tight ends very well. And then Jonathan Taylor catching the ball out of the backfield as well. They are a threat passing the ball as well, as we saw this last week against Michigan State. So Wisconsin, we're going to see what they're made of when they play Ohio State. I can't wait to watch that game. Should be a great one. My fourth rated team in the nation is going to be Oklahoma. And I'm sure I'm getting some eyebrows raised here. A team that you haven't seen yet, but just wait. So Oklahoma, they finally had their signature win against Texas, and that's purely what puts them at number 4. Their defense is very much improved, probably the most improved overall unit in college football this year. So Oklahoma this past weekend against Texas showed that when their offense isn't clicking 100%, even though the offense still performed very well, Lincoln Riley, one of the top offensive minds, if not the top offensive mind in college football and maybe football in general, but their defense carried them to a win when they really needed some stops. So Oklahoma, number 4. Alabama is number 5. And, the reason for that, they don't really have the resume yet. For this specific season, they've obviously looked very, very impressive. Their defense has been a little bit soft at times, and they are very, very young. I think they're starting several true freshmen on that defense. So come, later in the season, playoff time, if and when they get there, they've got a tremendous test against LSU coming up on November 9th. Both teams are going to be coming off a bye week. It's brilliant scheduling by the SEC to schedule it that way for both teams coming off a bye. That's going to be a huge game, and that's going to decide the SEC West. So, I look for this to really be sorted out here in the SEC. But Alabama, as of right now, their top win is going to be over Texas A&M. You're going to see a trend down this list in the top 10. Their only quality win is against A&M. And, they beat them soundly, but, not really the resume there to move them up above those other teams that have better quality wins. And in the case of Ohio State, really being incredible on the eye test. Moving down the list, number 6 is going to be Clemson. Now, Clemson, they, again, their top win is going to be against Texas A&M. The difference is they just snuck by UNC. They really, one different, like a game of inches, and that game goes the other way against North Carolina. And then Clemson, aside from teams above them losing this year, which will happen because they play each other, with exception of Oklahoma, they're going to have a hard time moving up in those rankings. I do see them in the playoff again just because they really don't have any tests. Maybe that last week of the season they slip up against South Carolina, but I think, Dabo, being a great coach that he is, a great motivator, I think he probably got in their ear a little bit, as you saw against Florida State this past week and how they performed. But that North Carolina scare probably set them on the right course that, hey, maybe we should stop feeling ourselves a little bit and go out and dominate the way that we should. So my number 7 team in the nation, Penn State. And I was tempted to move Penn State up above Clemson and maybe even above Alabama, as their resume to this point has been a little bit better. Probably what kept them down there is going to be their little scare against Pittsburgh. Now, that was a rivalry game, which rivalry games typically tend to be close, but Pitt's really not a good team. I think they were just really off their game that day. But other games, they've looked incredibly impressive. Maryland, after Maryland had that hot start to the year, they kind of cooled off a little bit, and Penn State just obliterated them 59-0, I believe. So, Penn State's looked really, really good at times. And so Penn State at number 7. And this one, number 8, is going to be a huge surprise to me. Not because of preseason expectations. I think Florida, we all kind of expected them to have a great defense, which they do have once again this year. But, looking at them in week 0 against Miami, to me, Miami looked like the better team, and they kind of lost the game more than Florida won it. And so since then, I've kind of discounted Florida quite a bit, to be honest with you. And it wasn't until, they snuck up and beat Auburn that I really started to take them seriously. And I know Felipe Franks was their veteran quarterback, and you hate to see anybody get hurt, but I can say this, that it might be one of the best things as far as win perspective to happen to Florida this year is Felipe Franks getting hurt. The backup has stepped in and has done really, really well. Trask has played really well, and they really gave LSU a heck of a test this past week. So, Florida, in my mind, is very elevated after the way they've performed. And Auburn is going to be the next team. Their top win this year is against Oregon. Again, I thought Oregon looked like the better team, and I thought Oregon got overly conservative, but the fact is they won the game, and so that's why they're above Oregon for that 9 spot, Oregon in the 10. Now, the two teams that I left out would be Georgia. That was a terrible loss to South Carolina, and Notre Dame. So, Notre Dame, they lost to Georgia. They haven't really beat anybody of notoriety, and they're probably not going to for the rest of the season. At this point, Notre Dame looks like a really big long shot, especially after previous years getting into the playoff and really just not performing well. So Notre Dame is a huge long shot for the playoff. So at this point in the season, this is my top 10 right here. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your input, and thanks for watching.